Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today in another session of our Learning from Women Leaders Around the World series. Today, I am very happy to introduce you all to Jennifer Murphy. She is the Director of Marketing at Ericsson Translations, Inc. It is a women-owned company based in the US, and it is one of North America's top language services providers. In this role, Jennifer is responsible for developing and implementing marketing strategies that communicate the company's mission and capabilities, while supporting Ericsson's outreach and business development efforts. Before joining Ericsson in 2013, Jennifer provided marketing, communications, and organizational support to companies in the fields of architecture and design, arts and education, and communication technology. She earned her bachelor's degree from Temple University in Philadelphia, obtained her certificate in graphic and interactive design from the University of California, Berkeley, and currently lives in Brooklyn, New York. In this webinar, Jennifer will provide some insight about how to manage your company's commercial objectives and goals in an increasingly diverse and multilingual world. A properly localized website is becoming an essential component for businesses aiming to expand into new markets and engage new audiences. In this webinar, you will learn how to reach multilingual audiences while staying on brand and on message. Jennifer will help you develop an approach to language, imagery, and design that will resonate across cultures. Then she will introduce us to the ins and outs of translation and localization. She will also share the latest developments in translation technology to help you understand how you can develop a multilingual website that is affordable, scalable, culturally appropriate, and engaging to the people you want to reach. So please, Jennifer, if you would like to introduce yourself, and let's start with the webinar. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. That was a really nice introduction, and thank you to everyone who's attending today. I'm very happy to be able to speak to you about these topics. Okay, so with that, I'm going to jump right in. Today, we're going to be talking about reaching multilingual markets, creating content, developing effective partnerships, and utilizing translation technology. All right, so I'm going to start by, all right, giving you just a brief outline here of the topics we're going to be going over. First, we'll discuss website localization and the steps you can take to make your digital content ready for the world. Then we'll talk about the process for translating your content and making your site ready for multilingual, multicultural audiences. I'll introduce you to language services providers to give you an understanding of what they do and how they can help you through this process. And then we'll take a look at some of the latest developments in language technology that are going to make it easier for businesses to develop the websites they need to go global. Okay, but before we get started with all of that, let's address the question, why translate your website? So Common Sense Advisory is a research firm that provides data on translation and localization. Through their studies, they've found that it takes 12 languages to reach 80% of the world's online audience, and 21 languages to reach 90%. So these are interesting statistics. They show that if you're planning to take your business global, English may not be enough. If you want to make yourself accessible to markets around the world and open up new opportunities, there's a definite value in creating content in other languages. The extent to which you do that, of course, needs to be aligned with your business plan and with your goals. So one more slide here with some more statistics. This is by Internet World Stats, and they report on internet users by language. This chart here shows the top 10 languages spoken by internet users. Now, tallying data like this is kind of complex because many people around the world speak multiple languages. So for simplicity, Internet World Stats is only looking at an individual's primary language in the data that they're presenting here. So now what I'm doing is adding in the world's population for these languages. This includes all the people who are not yet online. So you can really see the potential for each one of these languages. So looking at this data, you can see that it's very clear. English and Chinese, they're dominating the internet. They're up at the top there. 72% of English speakers are online, and over 55% of Chinese speakers are online. Now look down the bottom at Russian. Only 26.6% of Russian speakers are online. That means there's incredible growth capacity here, because a large percentage of Russian speakers have yet to come online. So Russian language websites are going to be needed to support that type of growth. So kind of on the other side of the scale, like looking at this chart, you can see that French and German, they're towards the bottom there. They look like they're practically at capacity. Over 93% of French speakers are online and close to 90% of German speakers. So this would make it seem like there's really less growth potential when it comes to these languages. However, again, this data is only looking at an individual's primary language, and French is spoken as a second language in many countries around the world, as is German. French and also English are experiencing a resurgence of growth right now due to their increasing adoption in Africa and in the Pacific as secondary languages. So then down the bottom here, we have all of the other languages. So this accounts for the statistic in the previous slide. 21 languages are needed to reach 90% of the internet. The internet is rapidly changing as new users are coming online and they're speaking a wider variety of languages. Different countries are in different places in terms of internet adoption. Many African and Asian languages are seeing sudden, rapid online growth. So there's really no easy answers that can help you determine which languages are most important to your business and to what degree. That's unique to each and every business and their plan for growth. However, you can see here the opportunities that begin to open up when you create digital experiences in languages other than English. Because studies clearly show people don't buy what they can't understand. And it's more than just customers. As businesses increase their global presence, there's more and more need to interact with employees as well as business partners in their own languages. Okay, so that is the why. Now I'm going to just jump briefly into some terminology to give you an overview of some of the key terms that pertain to website localization. So starting with globalization. Globalization refers to the broad strategy to prepare and to launch your products and your services to a global audience. So it includes all the processes that are required to make your product applicable and usable to the people in your target markets. So this includes adapting your products and services so they're global ready, crafting your multilingual communications, and also developing the processes and the policies related to international trade and commerce. So then, internationalization. This is a design and development process that helps ensure a software product or a website can handle the various languages and cultural conventions without requiring a whole redesign each time. It's basically enabling the back end of a website to handle different languages, character sets, different currencies, form data, different types of search capabilities. Internationalization is done when you're developing the English version of the site for the first time. It gets you ready for that next step, localization, to make it easier and faster and less expensive. So internationalization is usually performed once. It enables your site to be ready for the world. All right, so while internationalization prepares you for the world, localization is the process of adapting your product or your content to a specific locale or market. The aim of localization is to give your product the look and feel of having been created specifically for that market. Whereas internationalization is only done once, localization is done every time you want to target a new culture. Localization includes adapting text and graphics, adapting the design and the layout to properly display the text, modifying the content to suit the tastes of your target market, converting to local currencies and local units of measure, using proper formats for dates, addresses, phone numbers, addressing local regulations and legal requirements. And we'll go into some more of these items in more detail later. That's just kind of an overview of all the things it encompasses. So then we have translation. So translation is a part of that localization process. It's the communication of meaning from one language, the source language, to another language, the target language. Translation should convey the original tone and intent of a message, while it takes into account cultural and regional differences between the source and the target languages. Okay, now that we have the basic terminology, let's get started with website localization. I'm going to discuss some tips and some best practices to help you develop content for multilingual, multicultural audiences. Okay, to start with, what markets do you want to target? And it starts with knowing your company and knowing your industry. Where is your company today? Where do you want to be? What outside factors impact your business? How is technology affecting your product or the services that you offer? Is it expanding the market? Is it going to be limiting your market in a number of years? These are all factors you need to be thinking about as you develop that global strategy. And you have to do the research. Don't assume that if it works in your home country, it's going to work anywhere. Identify that market need. How in demand is your product or service? You need to find a market that's hungry for what it is you have to offer. What's the competition like? Who's doing business in your market? How easy will it be to break in? Will you be higher or lower priced? It's really a good idea to conduct a full SWOT analysis against the competition in each and every market you're considering. Is that market familiar with what you're offering, or you're going to have to introduce them to a whole new concept? And if so, that's a different type of planning. Your first goal also involves finding out more about your target consumer. What languages do they speak? What websites are they visiting? What social media outlets do they interact on? What are their pain points? What are their online buying habits? So consider all the factors, positive and negative, that have the potential to impact your ability to be successful in your market. It could be your strategy to select one country and focus on success there, rather than tackling 4 or 5 right away. That presents a more scalable approach. Ultimately, it comes down to taking an educated approach to determine what's best for your long-term business strategy. So, all the factors I just went over are they're just starting points, really, to help you develop that business plan so you can then really begin to customize your approach for the markets you decide to target. So in the rest of this presentation, we're going to focus on how you customize that content for your target market, target culture, and how you fully localize your digital content. And we're going to start with language, how to develop a plan to put your website into your client's language. All right, starting off with that big question. How much of your site should you translate? You may elect to do every last word, or you may want to translate, just select content. So first, I'm going to tell you about the 2 main types of content on a website. There's static content. So static content doesn't change very often. This could include a company's history, their mission and values, or the descriptions of their services offerings. Then there's dynamic content. So dynamic content is content that changes a lot and might even need to be updated daily. For example, news articles, blogs, events, social media related content. Most websites today have a combination of both. And some companies choose to only translate the static content, and they leave the content that changes regularly in English. Some companies translate the dynamic content as well, or they do it just for their core markets. And of course, another thing to consider, don't forget about the materials on your site that might be available for download, such as PDFs, brochures, or fact sheets. You need to consider whether or not these are items for translation. I mean, ultimately, this is a decision that depends on your business plan, your budget, your time, and your resources. And it may vary per market if certain markets are higher priority or more immediate targets. If you elect to translate the dynamic content, have a plan in place up front so you're prepared to translate this content on a regular, ongoing basis. All right, so now let's talk a little about text. Writers often create source content without localization in mind, but you'll save time, money, and create more effective messaging if you write with that global audience in mind from the start. So here are just a few guidelines. I'm gonna say it again, do your research but you need to do that so you understand your market, so you can present your message in a manner that resonates. Because it may be necessary to change your message. Context, history, and local conventions all need to be taken into consideration. And for example, references to football might be appropriate for an American audience, but for a European audience, it's a little bit different. They might call it football, but the images you would select would be similar to what we Americans think of as soccer. And so there have been many instances where global corporations have gone to market without thinking enough about the cultural context that they're working in. And this can be risky, and it can even drive away business. So, one very famous example of this is HSBC. A number of years ago now, they rolled out a new marketing campaign with the tagline, "Assume nothing." But in a number of countries, this translated into "do nothing." So that is absolutely not an effective call to action. All right, so moving on from that, in your writing, you also want to avoid slang and humor, avoid abbreviations, jargon, cliches, idioms, colloquial expressions. Phrases like "go the extra mile" or "a dime a dozen," they're not going to hold the same meaning in other cultures. So another point, write sentences that are affirmative rather than negative. For example, "don't obscure your message" could be reframed in a positive way by saying, "make your message clear." You also want to limit your use of compound words, for example, "part-time employee" or "world-class product." Keep it simple. Write text that's clear, concise, and literal. It's ultimately going to be easier to translate. One benchmark you might want to think about, try to keep sentences to 20 words or less, because long sentences are likely to obscure your point. And of course, can't emphasize this enough, but proofread. Make sure your language is grammatically correct and error-free. It's better to put the time in up front than to deal with multiple corrections and misunderstandings down the road. All right, so a few things to consider about the usage of text on your website. Text expands and contracts from language to language. For example, Spanish. It expands approximately 20% over English, while Finnish and Chinese might contract by 25 to 30%. The example I'm showing here, it's, sorry about that, little background noise. This is showing the "contact us" message on a web page. So it's intended to illustrate here that the header expanded when it was translated into German. if the page had been designed to accommodate a single line header, that's just not going to happen on the German website. So, that has to be considered in putting that design together from the get-go. All right, so here I'm going to show you a different type of example of that expansion and contraction. This is Skype's website in English on the left and Chinese on the right. So you can see how the text contracts a little bit from one to the next. This expansion contraction is going to impact the layout of the pages, including the placement of the text in relationship to the graphics and the navigation. So now I'm going to swap in Skype's Spanish page on the right. So you can see again that it has some expansion over that English language page on the left. But nothing here really impacts the layout because this layout was designed to accommodate expansion. There's plenty of room here. I mean, you can add all the long German words you need and they'll fit without making this layout awkward. So when you develop that website, it can be tempting to use every bit of screen real estate, but it'll save time down the road if your layout is designed to be flexible and has some room to permit for that text expansion. All right, so some languages like Arabic and Hebrew, they run from right to left. On a web page, this means that you not only have to reverse the flow of the text, but you have to reverse the placement of all the navigational elements, to maintain the intended user flow. So here's an example of Boeing's homepage. The American site is on the left, and Israel's site is in front on the right. Now the site has been localized, so you're not comparing apples to apples. There are differences in the layout. For the American audiences, they use a simpler layout with a large single banner image. But you can also note that, not only is the text reversed, you see that logo is on the opposite side of the header. Another example is 3M's American homepage in the back, and the homepage for their Arabic audiences here in the front on the right. Again, it's quite a different layout, including that symbol, that like single large banner image on the American homepage there. But you can see, again, that the logo is reversed, the navigation in the header has been flipped, as well as that search bar. Okay, now because of these issues, it's best to build your site in a content management system that supports multiple languages. So a content management system, or a CMS, is the platform you use for website authoring and administration. And some examples of platforms that are easy to work, they're easy and they work well for multilingual websites: WordPress, Joomla, Drupal. They're tried and true. Many people use them when they're developing content for multilingual audiences. Okay. Now, text is only a part of that user's experience. Different cultures have different conventions for times and dates, phone numbers, addresses. All these things need to be taken into consideration when you're localizing. Weeks start on Sundays in the US. However, many countries adhere to a different week date system where weeks start on a Monday. Everything from functionality to layout and fonts, they all play a large role in shaping a visitor's experience with your website and with your brand. Okay, now let's talk about images. An image is worth 1,000 words. Images are so important in communicating your brand, and they carry strong emotional impact. Select images that are appropriate to the cultures you're targeting. Sometimes the same image can elicit different emotional responses from viewers in different cultures. Avoid culturally biased images, or anything that could be sensitive or confusing. If you use images of people, ask yourself, can all of my visitors relate to the people in these images? Just a few examples of companies who have had missteps in this area. Nike. So Nike had to recall thousands of shoes from their Arabic markets when a decoration intended to resemble fire on the back of shoes actually resembled the Arabic word for Allah. Pampers is another example. When Procter & Gamble started selling Pampers diapers in Japan, they used an image of a stork delivering a baby, and it didn't catch on. So Procter & Gamble then did the research to find out that Japanese consumers, they found it kind of disconcerting to see a stork carrying a baby because that story just isn't a part of Japanese folklore. In Japan, giant floating peaches bring babies to their parents. I mean, right? So snorks were the stork idea. It was cute, but it was confusing. So choosing images that resonated with that culture would have helped this campaign have more of the impact that Pampers was looking for. And just to show you the images on this slide here, this is the Nivea homepage with China on the upper left, for Ghana on the upper right, for the Middle East, and for Vietnam. All right, so next, color. Color is also a really important factor to consider. Color is powerful. The meanings and the associations that people derive from color really also vary widely from country to country and from culture to culture. I mean, for example, so in India, red, it's associated with purity. That's a country where brides traditionally wear red wedding dresses. In North America, however, red can draw associations to danger, passion, excitement. In the West, white is traditionally associated with weddings, purity, cleanliness. In many Asian cultures, though, it can represent death, mourning, humility. So the same colors, very different emotional responses. I'll give you an example of a company's mistake in this area. Euro Disney. Early on, they launched a multi-million-dollar European ad campaign, which featured the color purple pretty prominently. Now, in Western Europe, purple still has a strong associations with Catholicism. And, emotionally, it's still, to some degree, related to crucifixion and death. And this definitely contradicted what Disney wanted to aim for with that campaign. Disney ended up reworking its entire European campaign to a lot of time and money. And they were criticized for trying to force feed US products and models to local cultures rather than adapting their approach to local preferences. Now I'm going to show you an example of a global corporation that truly localized their website for different markets around the world. McDonald's. They have customized the experience for every market. The use of imagery varies from country to country. The layout changes because different cultures have different preferences about how they like to view information. They even modify their product offerings by country. The company's signature red color is used throughout the global sites, so it maintains the brand. But McDonald's, it adapts the usage of this color to the culture. I mean, for example, in countries where red is a very favorable color, the site uses a very saturated red as a background color, in comparison to other sites like the one shown now, where it's reduced to an accent color. So multimedia is another big element to consider. And there are many options available for localizing audio and video, and these include voiceover recordings and inserting subtitles. So subtitling is the process of adding the written transcript of a video to the screen, shown in time with the spoken dialogue. And as more sites are using video, even same language subtitling is becoming very common practice because many visitors have sound turned off. It's also intrusive to autoplay sound, and most devices don't allow it. So subtitles solve this problem by allowing viewers to understand your video content without listening to the audio. Some of the standard approaches to this are placing white text over the picture or white text in a black box. A few of the examples I've just shown work the subtitles into the image quite nicely, but ultimately it needs to be a design consideration like any other. While subtitles, they can aid legibility, they can also obscure some of the video if they're just not considered in the design. Another point about subtitles, they can be burned so they're always on the screen with no option to remove them. They can also be set up so the viewer can turn them on and off as that video plays. And of course, translated subtitles are an effective way to put your video content in another language. If you do want sound, dubbing is an alternative to subtitling in which a translated soundtrack is added to a video, replacing the original language audio track. And the dub is, it's timed so it closely matches the speed of that original speaker. So, thinking about all of this, localization of these multimedia elements requires additional time. So consider upfront, as with anything else, how much multimedia you really plan to incorporate into the site and to what extent you plan to localize it for other markets. Planning in advance gives you a better sense of the time and the budget for these elements upfront. All right, so you are developing content. What comes next? How do you actually go about putting your site into another language? So technology has streamlined the translation process. It's made it more affordable, it's added quality controls. So we're going to talk a little about that and how it helps you as a business owner. But first, I'd like to introduce you briefly to language services providers and what they do. So language services providers, or LSPs, they adapt products and services for consumption in multilingual markets. They provide translation and localization services and offer expertise on languages, culture, customs, and other characteristics of the target locales. So LSPs vary greatly by size, from mom and pops that might offer one language combination to global companies who handle many markets and many languages. In-house staff typically manage projects and provide technical support, while the actual translation work is performed by linguists, typically freelance linguists from all over the world. Most LSPs that offer multiple languages are going to be working with an extensive network of freelance linguists, because this permits them a large pool to select from on each job based on that linguist's subject matter expertise as well as language capabilities. So for example, like for legal work, you'd want to select a translator with degrees in law or related professional expertise. In addition, they would have to be a native speaker of the language they're translating into. And typically, they would live in a country where that language is spoken. This is because language is constantly evolving. And in-country linguists, they're just more familiar with current terminology, and they're going to be better able to capture the local flavor of that language. They're aware of what's going on in their country from cultural, social, political perspectives, which enables them to develop a culturally appropriate tone that'll resonate with the people who live in that locale. So this is going to require a pretty extensive global network, but it also guarantees that your translator will be someone who understands both the technical terminology as well as the language. And in many cases, the work isn't just translated by one translator. It's then edited by a second translator, because translation, it's an art. It's not a science. And there are always different interpretations of language. So by having multiple experienced translators look at text each time, it helps ensure quality. All right, so that is how LSPs are structured. And now the translators are supported by technology in a very large way. So we're going to talk about what type of technology is out there and how it helps you work with the provider and helps you customize that localization process to produce the results that are right for your business. Because the latest developments in translation technology really do allow work to be completed faster, with greater accuracy, and it helps save everybody money. All right, so into technology. So how do you get started translating a website? Do you copy text from your site into Word files and email it to an LSP? No, even not anymore. Even if you are translating something as complex as a website, your translation provider can handle the entire process from start to finish, working directly in your CMS. Translation technology tools now provide what's called interoperability. Basically, they allow LSPs to connect our system to your system. And that transfer of content is done automatically from your CMS to the LSP's translation tools, online from anywhere in the world to anywhere in the world. So this reduces your manual involvement, and it automates the process of file preparation and file transfer, saving time and money. So our tools allow the translator to extract the translatable content from the source code, whether it's HTML, XML, or any other code language. Basically, our tools separate the translatable text from the rest of the code that's deciding the page layout, the text style, the navigation. It makes it clear what's what, so only the right elements get translated with no time wasted sorting through code or copying and pasting text. By doing this, these tools eliminate the potential for human error in modifying the code. Okay, going into some tools. A very key tool is translation memory. All right, this is a software that compares segments of text. It stores text as it's translated. So if you ever reuse the same combination of words, the software tells the translator, and every time that word combination pops up, the translator can then use the same translation. As the translation memory is built, it's used on future projects as well. So the same sentence you translated on your homepage can then be phrased the exact same way in your marketing brochure. Now, translation memory is not good for all types of work. You don't want to translate literature using a TM. But if you have a product brochure or any other type of materials that are repetitive or technical, that's where it becomes really valuable. And, to reiterate, it's only prompting the translator. Ultimately, they make the decisions on how the language is used. All right, but there are numerous benefits to this translation memory. It creates a consistent message. So even if you have a huge website along with lots of corresponding marketing materials, this type of work requires multiple translators, but they're all going to be referencing the same translation memory. So all of your text will be translated with consistent tone and consistent phrasing. Also, it saves you money. Translation work is typically priced on a per word basis. So most LSPs will offer discounts on those repeated segments. The software, it compares the source text, the text you start with the translation memory. When it finds strings of text already in the TM, your translation provider can then offer you a percentage discount on the per word rate for that phrase. So, for example, if a phrase matches something you've translated before, you might only pay like 35% of the per word rate for that phrase. So that, that might sound small if you're talking about a sentence, but in the context of a large project or multiple projects or ongoing work, it can add up into really significant discounts. Think about like a product catalog that's reprinted every year with only minor changes each year. So that's where you would really see it amounting to big savings. So another tool is the glossary. A glossary includes your key terminology in your source language, in this case we'll say English, and the approved translations for that key terminology in your target languages. Glossaries are part of your terminology databases, and they help the translators ensure that each time a key term is used, it's used consistently and correctly. So, for example, notebook computer. That may be synonymous with laptop, but you should really select one term to use in all of the materials supporting your product launch. A glossary, so it should also include any terms that are not to be translated. So for example, you might elect to keep product names in the source language. The glossary helps identify these terms for the translator, so they're kept in the correct language every time. So the earlier you can create this glossary, the better, because then it will ensure that consistency through all your materials. In the past, a company's internal reviewer or their LSPs created these glossaries manually. Today, LSPs typically use web-based terminology tools that help them build and maintain a glossary and share terms among linguists and reviewers. Updates are made in real time and everyone is in sync. So in addition to glossaries, many companies also develop style guides. So the style guide addresses more than just language. It covers tone and it covers the visual formatting that sets the look and the feel of your site. This includes the way a company's name is used, the capitalization of product names and categories, the use of English measures or metric measures, the use of serial commas. It can describe tone and the way your text should sound. Style guides also address visual and formatting issues such as image placement, photography guidelines, how to use captions and credits, headline treatment, or the guidelines for how to use alt text in images. So I'm going to show you two quick examples of how style guides are used, and one is MailChimp. The email marketing service, they have a very thorough style guide that addresses everything from how to write about people to writing for accessibility, to the placement of copyright information. I especially love the way they describe their voice here. Funny but not silly, confident but not cocky, smart but not stodgy, informal but not sloppy, helpful but not overbearing, expert but not bossy, and weird but not inappropriate. So in this case, providing terms and counter terms really does an excellent job of framing the voice and the tone that MailChimp wants their content to take. Right, and another example here is the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Their style guide includes a description of how to use the university's name. The first reference should always use the entire name. Subsequent references can be abbreviated in a few different ways. They also address the use of titles and subtitles. So developing a style guide is a good practice in general, not only when you plan to translate, but it can also help keep your message consistent when you have new staff members join, or like if you hire an outside marketing agency. You will have established rules for consistency in everything you do. All right, now back to the translation process. One more thing you would want to provide to your LSPs whenever possible is any reference materials or any previously translated materials. This is just helpful to avoid contextual errors and improve consistency and adherence to your preferred style. Okay, now, after you have all the materials in place, your content passes through translation and editing. Again, typically translated by one linguist and edited by a second linguist, as we discussed earlier. Then the next step, quality control. So that quality control step is another quality check. It's just another measure to help ensure your translations are correct. This all used to be done manually, but now software exists that makes the process faster and more accurate. Quality control tools, they're just better than the human eye, right? So they provide an aid to the person performing the quality check, typically a project manager. The tool scans the text and it identifies potential mistakes, such as inconsistent use of terminology, missing translations, double spaces, misused punctuation or missing numbers. The tool then gives the project manager a report, and they verify the items in the report and ultimately use their judgment to make the changes as needed. All right, so after the translation is completed and it's been reviewed by the translation team, we get to client review. So after all of this, you have professional translators, subject matter experts, experts in the language translating your text. Then it's reviewed by another translator, aided by sophisticated software. Why would you do another review? Because you are ultimately the specialist. You know your brand, your content, and your company. Your translators are making informed, educated decisions on language, but you still know your company better than anyone. So having someone in your company review the text helps maintain your unique voice. So it can be a partner or internal members of the team who live in the countries you're translating for, because now the tools, they make it really easy. It's all done through web-based portals. Everyone working on a translation project, linguists, project administrators, in-house reviewers, they can all have real-time access from anywhere in the world. And all of this review work is done in the tool. So an LSP can give your reviewers access to the translated text as well as the glossaries. So this eliminates the need for file exchange and it streamlines the process. Okay, so after the text has passed through client review and any changes have been made, there are two final review steps you can opt to do. These are functional and linguistic testing. So functional testing is where engineers review your site, and they're looking to ensure that the localized site works just the same as the English version. And things like links or buttons or streaming content, search functionality, page printing, form submissions. They want to make sure all of these things work properly. And then there's linguistic review. So that's where you use linguists to check the translation in context. This is just another step to verify that there's consistency across the website and everything makes sense before you go live. So as you can see, there are a lot of moving pieces to localization. Client portals are one thing that helps keep organized, right? In addition to the review portals that many LSPs offer, many are now offering client portals as well that can be used to manage all of the aspects of your jobs. These are basically online platforms that you can use to initiate jobs, upload files, download completed translations, You can archive files, manage invoicing, and even produce reports. So everything all in one place, all web-based, so everybody has access. Okay, so we have covered all of the real important tools to help you localize. And big question, after you go live, what next? Understand your website is constantly evolving and it needs to be updated on an ongoing basis. And that is just one piece of the puzzle. So your marketing materials, product information, legal materials, HR materials, they all need to be maintained and developed for the markets that you're moving into. Have a plan in place. You know, working with a translation provider as a partner, engaging them early, that can help you prepare for those updates you're going to need down the road. Developing your style guide and your glossary up front and building that translation memory from the start will help you establish that consistent messaging from the get-go. And that's what really helps ensure consistency throughout all of your materials. All right, I'm going to end with one more statistic. Salesforce conducted a study of Fortune 500 companies, which showed that those companies that localized their content were 2 times more likely to increase profit and 1.25 times more likely to grow earnings per share year over year. This is because companies that invest in localization and do it the right way, they really communicate stability, permanence, and a real commitment to doing business with the people in a community. Ultimately, that effective localization helps companies develop the engaging relationships with clients and prospects so they can drive business. All right, that is the end. I think I've covered everything. Thank you all for listening to me for the past hour.
That was awesome, Jennifer. You did cover a lot of things, and it was really very interesting. I want to please ask the attendees to share their questions or comments in the questions or chat boxes, and I'll be reading them out loud. So please take the chances of the few minutes we have left to make the questions. We do have some questions from here from the team. You were mentioning that it would be wise for you, for example, if you're launching your website. There are certain platforms that support translation. You mentioned, I think, 3. How can a person who's building their website know if the website supports or not several languages or translation?
Oh, well, first, that's certainly a question to, to address with your web developer from the get-go. Any type of developer you're using should be familiar with whether or not a platform has those capabilities. If not, that's certainly worth researching with the specific platform. I've named 3, but there are more because, more and more businesses are going global. More and more companies are taking their websites into different languages. So, those platforms are continually changing their capabilities. I mean, I know that, there are also different plugins and that are coming out all the time. I mean, talk to your developer about this. If you're doing it yourself, then look at the literature that is being published about that platform from the get-go. It's there. They will, information is published about these platforms. It's hard to be more specific than that because this is changing and developing all the time as the platforms grow and add more capabilities to cover, this type of development.
All right, thank you. Yes, I was thinking of, so many entrepreneurs are trying to use those, not new websites where you can create your own websites and try to, so once you start something, it might get more difficult to change eventually if you didn't start off with the right or the correct type of platform. So that's
Exactly. And I know that many people who do, I mean, that do go multilingual use WordPress. It's one of the most common and is known to be a good platform to use for multilingual sites. And they do have different plugins available to assist with that, which they're constantly updating and doing more development work on. So, I mean, that's certainly one I do have experience with that I could suggest. But, you know, again, there are more coming out all the time. So do stay in front of it, you know, from the get-go if your plan is to localize.
That's great. If anybody would like to make a question, please, now it's the moment. Otherwise, I think I'll be sharing the information that Jennifer just, we will share the link to the video because this webinar has been recorded. So for all of you who would like to do some follow-up questions, you can do it by sending Jennifer an email or by connecting with us to help you make the connection.
Absolutely. If I may interject, please, I encourage you, if you have any other questions, reach out to me by email, connect with me with, you know, connect through LinkedIn. I am happy to, you know, help you with any of these issues. You know, I work for Ericsson Translations, and we are a full service language company. We handle localization for companies of all sizes, so we can certainly support you through this process if, you know, this is a road you choose to go down.
That's great. I would ask you, Jennifer, if you know, to close this session, if you could mention some of the ways you can engage in businesses with our women business enterprises. Most of them are based somewhere else. Is it possible for you to engage in businesses with them even if they are not based in the U.S.?
Oh, absolutely. We have, you know, the technology now, it makes it so seamless to, you know, do any of this work with people around the world. We work with clients around the world, and we help, you know, even small women-owned businesses support their clients around the world. And it is so seamless now. Really, it doesn't matter where
Where they're
people are
located.
located.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good to know. Perfect. So we're just in time. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for your time and all this information that you have shared. I really learned a lot myself, and I hope that all the attendees did the same. If again, if you have follow-up questions or you would like to learn more about Ericsson or Jennifer, you can follow up with her directly through her email, or you can just let us know. I will be sharing an email with all you to share the recording link and also more information about this webinar. So thank you so much, Jennifer, and thank you all for being connecting to this webinar.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.